The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with light, its ceiling shimmering with the projection of distant stars, its vast walls echoing with the sound of countless voices. Hundreds of leaders from across the galaxy had gathered, each wearing robes and symbols of their power, their faces lifted with pride and confidence. It was supposed to be a meeting of peace, a gathering to settle disputes before they grew into something greater. But instead, it turned into a stage for arrogance. From the center of the chamber, the representative of one of the most powerful empires rose. His armor gleamed, his sharp voice slicing through the hall. He raised his arm high and declared with absolute certainty, "We declare war on Earth." The words crashed like thunder, and the chamber erupted with sound. Gasps echoed across the rows of counselors, but soon those gasps turned to laughter. Many clapped their hands, some tapped their claws against the stone, others roared with amusement. To them, it was a joke, a spectacle. Earth, a young species, barely a few generations into the stars, had dared to defy the council before. Now, with war declared, most believed humanity would be crushed quickly. At last, one counselor jeered, his fangs flashing as he laughed. "This will end their arrogance. Earth will kneel, and their fleets will burn." But not everyone laughed. A few counselors exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions stiff. They had heard the whispers, the rumors that traveled faster than official reports. Stories of human fleets moving silently, of colonies defended with strange weapons, of battles won against odds that should have been impossible. Yet the laughter drowned those doubts, and arrogance filled the chamber like smoke. At the far side of the hall, the human envoy sat at his table. He was dressed in a plain dark uniform, free of decorations or symbols, his posture straight, his hands folded calmly in front of him. He did not rise to answer the declaration. He did not shout or argue. He did not even flinch when the laughter turned toward him, mocking his people, mocking his world. He simply watched, his calm eyes moving slowly across the chamber, meeting the gaze of one leader after another. That calm stare unsettled even the proudest voices. Some faltered mid-laugh when their eyes met his, though they quickly covered it with louder boasts. His silence was like a weight pressing down on the hall, heavier than any words could have been. The representative of the declaring empire slammed his fist onto the table, his voice full of pride. "Hear this, humans. You are weak. You are small. You cannot fight the might of the galaxy. Our fleets will crush your worlds. Our armies will scatter your people. Your silence will not save you. You should kneel now, before it is too late." His words earned cheers, but when he looked back at the envoy, the calm gaze did not change. There was no fear, no anger, only a quiet certainty that made the alien's chest tighten. For the first time, doubt crept into his proud voice. The laughter in the chamber continued, but the mood was shifting. The longer the human envoy remained silent, the more his stillness unsettled the room. Silence, usually a sign of weakness, now felt like something else. It was not the silence of fear, but the silence of someone waiting. Some counselors began to frown, their hands drumming nervously on the tables. They wanted to dismiss the feeling, but deep down they knew something was wrong. An older alien counselor, his skin silver and his voice raspy with age, rose slowly. His words trembled but carried truth. "You think this is victory already," he said, scanning the chamber with tired eyes. "You think humanity will kneel because you declare it so. But I have lived long enough to know better. Silence is not surrender. Humans are not like us. They remember every wound. They carry patience as a weapon. If you strike them now, you will not break them, you will awaken them." His words fell like a shadow, but once again, laughter drowned him out. "Old myths," another shouted, his voice filled with scorn. "He speaks of legends, of fear from another time. Humanity is nothing but a noisy child in the galaxy. They will learn respect, and they will learn it under our heel." The chamber roared with agreement, but unease flickered in the corners. The human envoy finally shifted, leaning forward slightly, his calm eyes glinting under the chamber's light. The sudden movement silenced the hall almost instantly. No one had expected him to speak, and for a long moment, he still didn't. He let the silence stretch, let it press against the counselors like a growing weight. The sound of claws tapping against the stone died away. Breathing grew heavier. Even the proudest voices fell quiet under that calm gaze. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, low, and without a trace of fear. You believe our silence means weakness. You believe your declaration means victory. You will learn soon enough that you are wrong. He leaned back once more, folding his hands again, his voice gone, but his words echoing in the chamber like thunder that refused to fade. The laughter did not return. No one dared to mock him now. Some counselors sat frozen, their pride crumbling into unease. The envoy had not shouted, had not threatened, yet his calm words carried more power than all their boasts combined. The chamber that had roared with arrogance now sat in uneasy silence, the weight of humanity's calm reply heavier than any war declaration. And in that silence, every leader wondered the same thing: what would humanity's true reaction be? The chamber was restless after the declaration. The echoes of the human envoy's calm words still lingered in the vast hall, and though many counselors had forced themselves to laugh again, that laughter no longer rang with confidence. It sounded strained, forced, brittle. Yet arrogance was a habit too deeply rooted in the council. By the next session, they had dressed themselves once more in pride and filled the chamber with their voices, eager to bury their unease under words. One counselor from a warrior race stood first, his heavy armor clattering as he rose. His voice was sharp, full of contempt. The human envoy thinks silence is power. It is not. Their silence is fear. They know they cannot stand against the might of the council. They hide their weakness behind calm eyes. But when our fleets arrive, they will kneel like all the others. His words were met with cheers, the sound rolling across the chamber. Yet it was clear that some joined the cheer out of habit rather than belief. Another leader, a tall alien with glowing veins beneath translucent skin, leaned forward, her tone mocking. Let us not waste time with warnings and old myths. Humanity has no history in the stars, no legacy of empire, no fleets that rival ours. We should not treat them as equals in these halls. We should treat them as what they are: children, reckless and small. When war begins, it will not last long. Again, applause followed, though this time fewer voices joined. The human envoy remained silent. He did not rise to challenge them, did not flinch under their insults. He simply sat with his hands folded, his eyes steady. That calm gaze made some of the boasting voices falter for a breath before continuing louder. The silence was unnerving, and the longer it stretched, the more it unsettled even the proudest hearts. From one corner, the old alien rose again. His silver skin gleamed faintly under the chamber lights, and his staff echoed as it struck the floor. You fools mistake patience for weakness, he said, his voice carrying a weary strength. You mistake quiet for surrender. But humans are not like us. They endure. They carry anger like fire in their blood. If you press them further, you will not face a beaten child. You will face a storm. His words stirred the chamber, but before anyone could consider them, another counselor barked with laughter, eager to drown him out. Storm? They have no storm. They are a candle in the wind, and we will snuff them out with ease. The chamber filled once more with forced cheers. While the council argued and boasted, reports slipped quietly into their records. Patrol fleets stationed near the edge of human space had gone silent. Messages sent from border systems failed to arrive. At first, the council dismissed these as accidents, errors in communication, or sabotage by rival empires. But the reports kept coming. A convoy had vanished without a signal. A station had stopped transmitting. Whispers began to spread among the aides and assistants who carried the documents into the chamber. Rumors crept into the corners like shadows. Perhaps the humans were already moving. Yet the leaders waved these concerns away. Pride was easier to believe than fear. Traders invent stories to stir panic, one counselor said with a sneer. Scouts exaggerate to excuse their failures. There is no human fleet. There is no human threat. They repeated these words like a shield, though in their hearts the cracks were widening. Far from the chamber, the truth was already unfolding. In the deep void, human warships stirred. Black and vast, they moved without fanfare, their engines burning quietly, their weapons ready. They struck not with grand declarations but with precision, erasing small patrols and leaving nothing behind but silence. The galaxy had not yet realized, but humanity's reaction to war had already begun. Back in the chamber, the debates dragged on. Some demanded immediate action, to launch the Council's fleets and crush Earth before the humans could gather strength. Others argued to wait, insisting that humanity would eventually submit under pressure alone. The arguments grew louder, sharper, but through it all the envoy remained still. His silence, more than any speech, was the loudest voice in the hall. At last, one counselor slammed his hand against the table, his voice rising above the others. Why do they not speak? Why do they not beg? If they know they cannot win, why do they not surrender now? His voice was filled with frustration, but beneath it was fear. Many turned to look at the envoy, hoping for an answer, but he gave none. He simply raised his eyes and met their stares one by one. That gaze was enough. A chill spread across the chamber, though no words were spoken. The envoy did not need to answer their questions. His silence carried its own message, one that none of them wished to hear. It was the silence of someone who knew more than they did, who carried certainty instead of fear. In the shadows of space, fleets continued to vanish. The whispers grew louder. And though the council shouted, mocked, and laughed, unease had already taken root. Humanity had not replied with begging or compromise. Humanity had replied with silence, and the galaxy was beginning to realize how dangerous that silence truly was. The chamber grew colder with each passing session. At first, the councillors had filled it with laughter and arrogance, but now that sound was thinner, weaker. The whispers of vanishing fleets could no longer be ignored. Reports arrived daily, each carrying the same chilling pattern. Patrols silent, convoys gone, border stations reduced to debris. The council still tried to deny it, tried to cover the truth with prideful words, but unease was spreading like cracks in glass. One councillor, his scaled chest heaving with anger, slammed his claws on the table. Lies! These are tricks, fabrications. Humanity does not have the power to erase fleets this way. His voice was loud, but the tremor beneath it betrayed his fear. Another, her eyes glowing faint blue, leaned forward with frustration. And yet the reports continue. Entire squadrons do not vanish without reason. Traders whisper of shadows in the void, of black warships striking without warning. If these are lies, then why do they come from so many corners? The debate grew hotter, louder. Some demanded immediate retaliation, the gathering of all fleets to strike Earth before the humans grew stronger. Others urged caution, their voices shaking as they begged to reconsider. The council, once united in arrogance, was fracturing under the weight of uncertainty. Pride clashed with fear, and neither side could silence the other. And through it all, the human envoy sat in silence. His plain uniform looked out of place among the glittering robes and polished armor of the other leaders. His hands remained folded, his back straight, his eyes calm. Every insult hurled at him, every boast shouted across the chamber, slid past him like wind against stone. He did not flinch. He did not blink. His silence grew heavier with every passing hour, pressing against the chamber like an invisible hand. Finally, one of the younger councillors broke under the pressure. His voice cracked as he shouted, pointing a trembling hand toward the envoy. Why do you sit there in silence? Speak. Defend your people. Tell us what you intend, or admit your weakness. The chamber fell quiet, every eye turning to the human envoy. The silence deepened, so heavy that even the hum of the chamber's machinery seemed to fade. The envoy lifted his head slowly. His calm eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of one leader after another. Many looked away almost instantly, unable to bear the weight of that stare. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and sharp, each word slicing through the air. You believe your declarations make reality. You believe your laughter hides your fear. But you are wrong. You declared war on us. You burned our colony. And now, you will learn what that means. Gasps filled the chamber. Some counselors stiffened in their seats, others muttered nervously, their pride cracked by the envoy's words. His tone was not loud, not angry, but calm, cold, and absolute. That calmness was more terrifying than any roar could have been. One counselor snarled, desperate to cover his unease. Empty threats. Your fleets are nothing compared to ours. You cannot stand against the might of the council. But his words rang hollow, and his eyes betrayed the fear he tried to hide. The envoy turned his gaze toward him, his expression unchanging. Your fleets are already falling, he said simply. Your might is already broken. You just do not see it yet. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some shouted that the envoy must be silenced and expelled. Others demanded answers to the growing reports. Voices clashed like weapons, filling the hall with noise. But even in that storm of sound, the envoy's calm words echoed louder. You burned our colony. You will learn what that means. Beyond the council's world, humanity's silent war was spreading. In the cold void, human fleets moved like shadows, erasing alien patrols with precision. Entire systems were cut off, their signals silenced before reinforcements could arrive. Survivors spoke of weapons that pierced shields effortlessly, of warships that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. These stories spread faster than the Council's denials, planting seeds of fear across the galaxy. Back in the chamber, the old alien rose again. His voice was tired, his silver skin dim in the light, but his words carried across the hall with grim certainty. I warned you, he said, his staff tapping against the floor. I told you silence was not weakness. I told you patience was not surrender. And now the storm has begun. Every report you deny, every whisper you mock, is truth. Humanity does not roar. Humanity waits. And when they move, they do not stop. For a moment, the chamber was silent again, the weight of his words hanging like smoke. Then the shouting resumed, louder than before, desperate to cover the fear growing in their hearts. But deep inside, none of them could escape the truth anymore. The humans were not afraid. They were not broken. They were answering, and their answer was spreading through the stars like fire. The envoy did not speak again. He did not need to. His silence carried more weight than all the council's noise. And as the councillors argued, trembling and divided, the galaxy outside their walls was already changing. Humanity's reaction had begun, and the council was only just starting to understand the price of their arrogance. The chamber was no longer the same place it had been at the start. Once, the walls had shaken with laughter, arrogance, and mocking words. Now, the walls carried a different sound. Shouts filled with fear, anger, and desperation. Reports had arrived one after another, each darker than the last. Entire patrols had gone silent. Colonies that once boasted of council protection no longer answered calls. The whispers that had once been dismissed as myths now grew into undeniable truths. Humanity was moving, and their silence was heavier than war drums. Still, the proud empire that had first declared war refused to accept reality. Their leaders stood tall in the chamber, their voices strong though their eyes betrayed unease. They are playing tricks, one of them insisted, his claws gripping the table as though holding himself steady. They strike in shadows, they pick off patrols, but they cannot stand against a true fleet. Give us the council's blessing, and we will show the galaxy that humans are nothing but pretenders. He raised his fist into the air, forcing his trembling voice into confidence. We will gather our fleets, we will crush them in open battle, and when we are done, no one will dare speak their name again. The chamber erupted in mixed voices, some cheered out of habit, clinging to pride like drowning men to driftwood, while others shouted warnings, begging the council to reconsider. But pride is a stubborn poison. Plans were approved. The empire gathered its fleets, convinced that numbers would restore their honor. In the depths of space, thousands of alien warships formed ranks. Cruisers, carriers, and dreadnoughts filled the skies, their engines glowing like suns. Their commanders broadcast their messages across the void, loud and triumphant, daring humanity to face them. They believed their size alone would crush fear into the hearts of their enemy. Across their homeworlds, Their people cheered, convinced that the storm would end in victory. But in the silence of human space, black warships were already awake. They did not broadcast. They did not boast. They drifted in silence, waiting, watching, moving like shadows. Their crews sat in calm readiness, their hands steady, their eyes sharp. No speeches were given, no promises of glory. They carried a simpler truth. Vengeance needed no speeches, only action. When the alien armada entered human space, the galaxy watched. Traders, spies, and distant sensors all sent frantic messages. The greatest fleet in living memory was on the move. Every species held its breath, waiting for the clash that would decide the future. The armada entered an empty system, barren and lifeless. For a moment, their commanders laughed, convinced humanity was hiding. Then the stars shifted. Shapes emerged from the darkness, massive warships sliding silently into formation. Human fleets, black and sharp, appeared as if they had been waiting all along. Their numbers were fewer, but their silence was suffocating. The alien commanders wasted no time. Their weapons lit the void, thousands of beams and missiles tearing forward in a storm of fire. The darkness of space became blinding with light. Explosions roared, stars seemed to flare, and the commanders shouted with pride, believing victory was at hand. But when the fire cleared, the humans still stood. Their shields glowed faintly, holding strong, their formation unbroken. Then humanity answered. The silence shattered into precision fire. Human weapons tore through the alien fleet with terrifying accuracy. Entire squadrons vanished in moments, dreadnoughts split apart as if cut by invisible blades. Missiles struck engines and reactors with surgical precision, detonating ships in brilliant bursts of flame. The alien armada, vast and proud, faltered almost instantly. Their formations broke, their commanders screamed for regrouping, for defenses, for retreat. But every command was drowned in chaos. Survivors tried to flee, their engines burning desperately, but human ships were already there, cutting them off with ruthless speed. It was not a battle. It was a dismantling. Piece by piece, the armada collapsed under the weight of human firepower. Back in the chamber, the reports arrived in real time. Counselors watched with wide eyes as their proud allies screamed over the comms. Images of burning ships filled the air above the table. Dreadnoughts tearing apart, carriers crumbling, commanders begging for aid before their signals were silenced forever. The chamber shook with cries of disbelief. "Impossible!" one shouted, his voice breaking. "No fleet could fall so quickly." Another counselor covered his face with trembling hands. "We sent them to their deaths," he whispered, his voice filled with dread. At last, silence returned to the chamber, broken only by the soft hum of the machines. The battle was over, and the once mighty armada was gone, reduced to wreckage drifting through space. The Council's pride had been shattered in a single engagement. Humanity's silence had spoken louder than any threat, and the galaxy trembled at the sound of it. In the corner, the old alien rose once more. His staff echoed as it struck the floor, his voice carrying through the heavy air. "I warned you," he said, sorrow heavy in his tone. "I told you their silence was not weakness. Now you see the truth. You thought you were declaring war on children, but you have awakened a storm. And this storm will not end until every debt is paid." The human envoy did not smile, did not gloat. He simply sat in silence, his calm gaze sweeping across the chamber. Many counselors could not bear to meet his eyes. Those who did felt their hearts tremble, for in those calm eyes they saw no joy, no triumph, only certainty. Humanity had answered, and their answer was written in fire across the stars. The galaxy trembled in the days that followed the fall of the Armada. What was meant to be the proudest display of power in generations had turned into a graveyard of wreckage floating in the cold void. Thousands of ships, once symbols of might and arrogance, now drifted in silence, their twisted hulls glowing faintly as fire died out among the stars. Traders who dared pass near the battlefield sent word of the devastation. Images of shattered dreadnoughts and broken carriers spread like fire, filling every port, every market, every world with the same chilling truth. Humanity had faced the greatest fleet the Council could build, and humanity had won. The whispers grew into a storm of fear. In taverns across the spiral arms, merchants lowered their voices, their eyes wide with terror. "I saw it with my own eyes," one swore. "They moved like shadows." The alien fleet fired everything they had, and when the fire cleared, the humans were still there. Refugees arrived in waves, fleeing colonies that had once trusted the Council's protection, but now feared the silence of human warships appearing without warning. Parents clutched their children, speaking the name of Earth with voices that trembled. No one laughed anymore. No one mocked. Humanity's silence was no longer a mystery, it was a warning. Inside the Council chamber, panic had replaced pride. Where once the walls had echoed with arrogance and mockery, now they rang with shouting, arguments, and fear. One counselor slammed his hands against the table, his voice breaking. "We must surrender. We must beg them to stop before we are all destroyed." Across from him, another snarled, his pride still clinging desperately to life. "Surrender? Never. We cannot kneel before them. If we do, we lose everything. We must strike again, harder, with more ships." His words were met with jeers, others shouting back, "With what ships? Do you not see? The greatest armada in history lies in ruins." The chamber roared with anger, fear, and despair, their voices clashing in chaos. And through it all, the human envoy remained silent. He sat with the same calm posture, his hands folded, his eyes steady. He did not rise, he did not interrupt, he did not shout. Yet every time his gaze swept across the chamber, counselors faltered. Their voices cracked, their words stuttered, their eyes turned away. The envoy had no need to speak. His silence carried the weight of the fleets that had already been erased. His silence was heavier than all their arguments combined. Outside, the reports kept coming. Patrols vanished without a trace. Colonies fell silent overnight. Refugee ships arrived carrying survivors who spoke of skies lit with fire, of defenses shattered in minutes, of black human warships that disappeared back into the void as quickly as they had come. "They do not speak," one survivor whispered in horror. "They do not demand. They do not even gloat. They come, they destroy, and then there is only silence." These words spread from world to world, each retelling adding to the growing terror. The proud empire that had first declared war was collapsing. Its colonies were burning one after another, its fleets scattered and broken, its people fleeing into the arms of neighbors who now feared taking them in. Once, their name had been spoken with pride, but now it was spoken only with dread. They had awakened the storm, and the storm was tearing them apart piece by piece. The Council grew more divided with every passing day. Some begged to send envoys to Earth, to fall at the feet of humanity and plead for mercy. Others demanded the creation of another fleet, though none had the strength left to build it. The chamber shook with shouting, but the shouting solved nothing. Pride and fear battled endlessly, while the galaxy outside their walls fell deeper into silence. In the shadows of the chamber, the old alien rose again. His staff tapped against the floor, the sound echoing through the storm of voices. Slowly, the shouting died as his aged eyes swept across the room. His voice, though tired, carried weight. "I warned you," he said, his tone heavy with sorrow. "I told you that silence was not weakness, that patience was not surrender. But you laughed, and you mocked, and you struck. And now look at what you have done. You did not awaken children. You awakened giants. And now the giants are walking." His words lingered in the chamber, pressing against every counselor like the silence of the envoy himself. But even as the old alien spoke, fear grew sharper. The reports no longer came from distant borders. Now they came from systems closer to the Council's heart. The humans were not staying in the shadows. They were advancing, step by step, closer to the worlds that had once believed themselves untouchable. Panic spread faster than fire. Civilians whispered prayers, leaders held meetings in secret, and whole planets began to prepare for evacuation. The galaxy had faced conquerors before, but never had it faced vengeance so cold, so relentless, so silent. On Earth, there were no cheers, no parades, no celebrations. In underground command centers, generals watched the maps of stars as enemy fleets vanished, one after another. They gave orders in calm voices, precise and steady, never raising their tone. Soldiers prepared for the next mission without smiles, their hearts heavy with memory. They did not fight for glory. They fought because their colony had burned, their families had been lost, and because silence was the only answer left. Back in the council chamber, the truth could no longer be denied. The galaxy was no longer ruled by the council. It was ruled by fear of Earth. And that fear grew stronger with every passing day. Humanity had not spoken again, but their silence had become the loudest voice in the stars. The council had reached its breaking point. The fall of the Armada had crushed its pride. The endless reports of burned colonies had shattered its confidence, and the whispers of refugees had poisoned its strength. But desperation is a powerful thing, and desperation drove the council to attempt one last stand. In their grand chamber, where arrogance had once ruled, voices now shook with fear and urgency. "We must unite," one councillor shouted, his trembling hands striking the table. "Every empire, every ship, every soldier must be called. If we do not fight together now, we will all fall one by one." His words struck a chord. Though some still whispered of surrender, others, too afraid of humiliation, agreed. Messages were sent across the stars. Fleets from a dozen empires were recalled from distant patrols, reserves pulled from hidden stations, war factories forced to work without rest. Slowly, a new armada began to form, larger even than the one that had already been destroyed. The council boasted again, not out of true confidence, but because they had nothing else left. "Humanity cannot withstand the entire galaxy," one leader declared, his voice trembling though he forced it to sound strong. "They will break when faced with us all." On countless worlds, propaganda filled the skies. Leaders promised their people victory, promising that the storm would finally end. Families watched the fleets rise with tears and hope, convinced that salvation was coming. Billions believed this would be the moment humanity would finally be stopped. Yet in the shadows, those same billions whispered their fears. They had heard the stories too often, from too many lips, to dismiss them as lies. Stories of black ships that appeared without sound, of weapons that cut through shields like they were nothing, of soldiers who advanced with calm faces, never stopping, never breaking. Hope and fear fought for space in their hearts, but fear was winning. In the depths of space, the Great Alliance fleet gathered. It stretched across systems, so vast that sensors struggled to map its full size. Carriers filled with fighters, dreadnoughts bristling with cannons, cruisers ready for war, all lined up in proud formation. Their commanders spoke proudly over the comms, their voices echoing with forced strength. "We will end this madness. We will bury humanity's arrogance beneath the weight of our combined might." Their fleets roared forward, engines blazing like suns. But on Earth, the humans were already watching. In dark command centers buried deep beneath the surface, generals studied the movements of the Great Alliance fleet. The maps glowed red with countless ships, yet the generals did not flinch. They spoke in calm voices, their words measured and steady. "They have gathered everything," one said, his eyes fixed on the display. "Every empire that mocked us now hides behind this desperate shield." Another nodded. "Then let us break it, and show them the truth they fear to admit." Orders were given, and once again, the black warships of humanity rose into the void. The meeting of fleets came in the shadow of a dying star. The Alliance arrived first, their ships spreading across the system in vast ranks, their commanders boasting over the comms. They dared humanity to appear, filling the void with threats and arrogance. For hours, there was nothing. Some began to laugh, convinced the humans were hiding. But then the stars shifted. From the darkness, humanity came. Black ships slid into formation, silent and precise, fewer in number yet carrying a presence that made even the bravest commanders hesitate. The battle began with fury. The Alliance unleashed everything. Thousands of beams, missiles, and torpedoes streaking across the void in a storm of fire. The star itself seemed to flare under the sheer force of the weapons unleashed. The commanders roared, believing their numbers would overwhelm. But when the fire cleared, the humans still stood. Their shields glowed faintly, unbroken. Their formations did not waver. Then came humanity's reply. The black warships struck in silence. Their weapons cut through the Alliance fleet with surgical precision. Entire squadrons vanished in moments. Dreadnoughts tore apart like fragile glass. Carriers exploded before their fighters could launch. The Alliance fleet tried to regroup, tried to form walls of steel and fire, but humanity moved too fast, too precise. They cut through the formations, striking weak points with deadly accuracy. Panic spread across the comms. Commanders shouted orders, begging their fleets to hold the line, but their voices were drowned by screams of dying crews and signals cut short. Ships turned to flee, but the humans were already there, cutting off their escape. The void was filled with fire, but beneath that fire was silence. The silence of human discipline, of unshakable vengeance. Back in the council chamber, the reports streamed in. Councillors watched in horror as the Alliance collapsed before their eyes. Images of burning ships, of commanders begging for help, of fleets shattering under the calm advance of humanity filled the hall. The chamber, once filled with pride, now echoed with despair. Some leaders wept openly, others fell silent, their faces pale, their voices gone. The truth was undeniable. Numbers meant nothing. Pride meant nothing. The entire galaxy could gather its fleets, and still, humanity would not break. In the corner, the old alien rose once more. His voice, though weak, cut through the cries of despair. "This is the end of your arrogance," he said. "You mocked their silence. You laughed at their patience. Now you see what you have awakened. Humanity does not need numbers. Humanity does not need boasts. They need only resolve, and that resolve has destroyed you all." His words lingered, and for once, no one argued. The battle ended in silence. The Alliance fleet, once the greatest in history, was reduced to drifting wreckage. The humans did not chase the survivors. They did not broadcast threats. They simply disappeared back into the void, leaving only ruins behind. Their silence spoke the truth clearly enough. Across the galaxy, despair became absolute. The Council had no fleets left, no armies to command, no pride to stand on. The galaxy itself was bending under the shadow of Earth. Humanity had shown their reaction to war, and it was something no one could have imagined. The storm was not finished, and every world now wondered when it would come for them. The Alliance fleet's destruction broke the last fragile thread of hope the Council had clung to. For centuries, they had believed themselves untouchable, the arbiters of law and power across the stars. Now, their fleets lay scattered as debris in the void, their colonies burned, their borders collapsing. The great empires that had once spoken with arrogance and pride now whispered only in fear. The galaxy trembled, and all eyes turned to the council chamber, hoping for a miracle that would not come. The chamber itself was no longer filled with laughter. Where once councillors had mocked, now they argued in panic. Some slammed their fists on the table, shouting that the galaxy must keep fighting. "If we kneel now, we are nothing," one roared, though his voice shook with terror. "We must rebuild. We must resist." But his words were drowned out by others who had lost everything. "Rebuild with what?" another cried, tears glistening in his alien eyes. "Our fleets are gone. Our worlds burn. If we fight again, we will be erased. We must beg for peace. We must throw ourselves at their mercy." The arguments rose higher, fear clashing with pride, but beneath it all lay despair. Every councillor knew the truth, even those who could not say it aloud. Humanity had already won. The only question that remained was whether the galaxy would survive what came next. At last, the old alien rose once more, his silver skin dulled, his voice weary but strong enough to silence the hall. "I told you this would come," he said. "You mocked their silence. You struck their colonies. You believed their patience was surrender. And now you see the truth. Humanity does not roar, but when they rise, they do not stop. The only chance you have left is to beg." His words hung in the air like a final verdict, and for once, no one laughed. No one mocked. The decision was made. Envoys were chosen from the Council's strongest worlds, cloaked in white as a symbol of surrender. Their ships carried no weapons, only messages of peace. Across their hulls, they painted marks of humility, signs meant to show humanity they came not as rulers but as beggars. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, their voices trembling with fear. They traveled in silence, knowing that one mistake could mean their end. When the envoys crossed into human space, the silence of the void pressed down heavier than ever before. No signals greeted them, no warnings, no demands. Only when black warships slid out of the darkness, vast and silent, did the envoys finally realize how small they were. The human ships surrounded them in perfect formation, weapons ready, their shadows blotting out the stars. The envoys sent messages of peace, begging for safe passage. The human fleets gave no reply. They simply escorted them forward, engines burning cold, eyes watching from behind steel walls. On Earth, the envoys were taken deep beneath its surface, into chambers carved of stone and steel. Human leaders sat at a long table, their faces calm, their eyes unreadable. The envoys fell to their knees before speaking, their voices trembling. "We come to beg for peace," the first said. "We come to admit our arrogance, to confess our crimes. We struck your colony, and we were wrong. We mocked your silence, and we were wrong. But we ask you now, please, stop. We will pay whatever price you ask. Resources, fleets, even entire worlds. We will give them all if you spare the galaxy." The humans did not respond. Their silence stretched like an ocean, suffocating the envoys where they knelt. Seconds felt like hours, their hearts pounding louder with every breath. Desperation cracked their voices as they begged again, louder, their hands raised in supplication. "Spare us. Spare our people. We will bow, we will kneel. Only end this war before nothing is left." Finally, one human rose from the table. His uniform was plain, but his presence filled the chamber. His voice was calm, quiet, yet heavier than thunder. "You declared war on us. You burned our homes. You killed our families. You thought we would beg. You thought we would kneel." His eyes swept over the envoys, sharp and unyielding. "But it is too late." The words fell like a hammer. The envoys froze, their blood running cold. Some wept openly, their tears falling onto the stone floor. Others tried to argue, their voices breaking, "We can change. We can make this right. Just give us a chance." But the humans said nothing more. Soldiers guided them back to their ships in silence, ignoring their cries. They were released not as a gesture of mercy, but as a message. When the envoys returned to the council chamber, their faces told the story before their voices did. They staggered inside, pale and broken, their eyes hollow from the weight of what they had heard. For a long moment, the chamber was silent, the councillors leaning forward, waiting, dreading the answer. Finally, one of the envoys whispered, his voice little more than a breath. They said, "It is too late." The words shattered the chamber. Some councillors screamed in rage, others collapsed in despair, and many simply sat in silence, their faces blank with horror. Pride and arrogance were gone, stripped away forever. All that remained was fear. Across the galaxy, the message spread quickly. The council had begged, and humanity had refused. There would be no treaty, no compromise, no surrender accepted. The storm would continue until humanity decided it was over. Refugees wept, leaders panicked, and entire worlds trembled, wondering how long they had left before the black warships appeared in their skies. In the corner of the chamber, the old alien closed his eyes, sorrow heavy on his face. "I warned you," he whispered. "You mistook silence for weakness. You mistook patience for surrender. Now you see the truth. Humanity has spoken, and their answer is death." The chamber dissolved into chaos, but his words lingered, echoing in the hearts of every councillor present. Humanity had spoken once, and it was enough to silence the galaxy. The galaxy held its breath. The council's envoys had returned defeated, their words trembling as they repeated humanity's final reply, "Too late." That phrase spread faster than light, whispered in markets, in palaces, in dark corners of refugee camps. Too late. It became the death knell of the council, the final sentence that no one dared challenge. Entire empires felt the weight of it. They had begged, they had offered everything, and still humanity had turned them away. Now there was nothing left but to wait for the storm to finish what it had begun. The council chamber was a hollow place. The leaders who once roared with pride now sat in silence, their faces pale, their voices gone. Some stared at the floor, others trembled as they clutched reports of burning worlds. Every day brought more bad news. Colonies lost, fleets erased, stations reduced to dust. The galaxy was collapsing, and the council had no answers left. They had been rulers once, but now they were only witnesses to their own downfall. The proud empire that had declared war first was already gone. Its fleets lay scattered in the void, its colonies burned, its homeworld a smoking ruin. Survivors fled like shadows, scattering into the arms of neighbors who feared taking them in. Their arrogance had awakened the storm, and the storm had erased them. Other empires knew they were next. None dared speak it aloud, but all of them saw the truth. The storm would not stop until the council itself was gone. Far from the chamber, humanity's fleets moved with precision. Black warships cut through the void, their engines glowing softly, their silence heavier than drums. They did not broadcast threats. They did not demand surrender. They simply advanced. Each battle was swift and merciless. Alien fleets tried to resist, but every attempt ended the same, wreckage drifting among the stars. Human soldiers landed on worlds with calm steps, their armor gleaming, their eyes sharp. They fought with discipline, never breaking, never hesitating. Their silence was more terrifying than any roar. The galaxy soon learned that humanity's vengeance was not conquest. They did not seize the worlds they burned. They did not claim the stations they destroyed. They simply erased them, leaving only silence in their wake. It was not war for territory. It was punishment. And punishment would not end until the council paid in full. The council's homeworld, jewel of the galaxy, became the final target. Its skies glittered with defenses, its orbit crowded with what remained of the council's fleets. From the surface, the citizens looked up and believed, for a moment, that they were safe. Their leaders told them that no enemy could break their shield, that no force could breach the heart of the galaxy. But deep down, everyone knew. They had seen too many fleets fall, too many defenses crumble. Hope was only a mask stretched over fear. When the human fleets arrived, the sky itself seemed to darken. Vast black warships slid into orbit, their numbers smaller than the defenders but their presence suffocating. The council's fleets surged forward, firing everything they had. The heavens filled with light, beams and missiles streaking across the void. For a moment, the world below believed their defenses might hold. But when the fire cleared, the humans were still there. Their shields glowed faintly, their formations unbroken. Then humanity struck. The silence shattered into fire as their weapons tore through the defenders. Dreadnoughts split apart in seconds, carriers crumbled before their fighters could launch, cruisers scattered in panic only to be picked off one by one. The defense grid lit up, spitting fire toward the attackers, but the human ships cut through it with ease, their precision strikes dismantling towers and stations as if they were toys. The Council's proudest defenses, the shield of the galaxy, fell in hours. On the surface, the ground shook as explosions thundered in orbit. Citizens flooded the streets in panic, their eyes wide as debris rained down from the skies. Towers collapsed, monuments shattered. The proud capital of the galaxy became a city of screams. Sirens wailed, but no help came. Humanity was above them, and nothing could stop their descent. Inside the council chamber, the leaders shouted in terror as the walls trembled around them. "We must flee," one cried, rushing toward the doors, only to be blocked by guards who themselves trembled with fear. "There is nowhere to run," another shouted, his voice breaking. Dust rained from the ceiling as the chamber quaked with the bombardment above. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy were reduced to frightened voices, begging for miracles that would never come. The old alien rose one last time, his staff shaking in his hand, his silver eyes filled with sorrow. "It is over," he said, his voice carrying above the chaos. "You mocked their silence. You struck their families. You thought their patience was weakness. And now their judgment has come. This is the price of arrogance." His words lingered for only a moment before the chamber shook violently, its great ceiling cracking as fire roared outside. Human soldiers landed soon after, advancing through the burning streets with calm steps. They met little resistance. What defenders remained scattered in terror. The soldiers moved with precision, securing their targets, surrounding the chamber. When the great doors finally burst open, the counselors inside froze. The humans entered without a word, their eyes cold, their silence absolute. In that silence, the counselors understood. They were not rulers anymore. They were relics, standing in the shadow of a species they had underestimated. The chamber collapsed not long after, burying the voices of the council beneath stone and flame. The galaxy felt the echo. The council was gone, its power erased, its arrogance silenced forever. Across the stars, every world trembled. Refugees whispered that no one would ever dare provoke Earth again. Traders spoke of black warships that carried judgment in silence. Leaders who once boasted now bowed their heads, swearing never to test humanity's patience. The galaxy had been reshaped, not by conquest, not by treaties, but by vengeance delivered with quiet certainty. On Earth, there were no parades, no songs, no cheering crowds. The generals stood in silence, their eyes heavy, their voices quiet. They had not wanted war, but it had been forced upon them, and now it was finished. They did not celebrate the fall of the council. They simply remembered the colony that had burned, the families that had been lost, and the promise they had fulfilled, that no one would ever harm their people again without paying the price. The old alien, watching from a distant world, gazed into the stars with sorrow. "It is done," he whispered. The galaxy mistook silence for weakness. And now silence is all that remains. And so the war ended, not with peace, not with compromise, but with silence. Humanity had risen, and in their rise, the council had fallen. The stars themselves seemed quieter, as if they, too, remembered what had happened. Humanity's reaction had become law, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson. Earth would never kneel.